Hey everyone. Tonight we're going to step away from the noise and the endless notifications. We're heading somewhere quiet, somewhere ancient, where the dust holds stories older than any written word. Imagine yourself standing under a sky so vast, it feels like a deep velvet ocean. The air is warm. The silence is broken only by the chirping of unseen insects. And in your hand, you hold a curved piece of wood that represents one of the most elegant and misunderstood pieces of technology ever conceived. This is a journey into the aerodynamic genius of the first Australians. Let's be honest, dropped out here with just this tool, your smartphone now a useless brick, you probably wouldn't survive the week. Your most advanced survival skill is likely knowing 3 different ways to order a pizza, none of which work without a signal. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel more than you know. While you're at it, post your location and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The last of the sun's warmth is bleeding out of the red earth beneath your feet. It radiates upwards, a final, gentle sigh from the land at the end of a long, hot day. The sky above is a masterpiece of transition, shifting from fiery orange and deep crimson near the horizon to a bruised purple, and then finally, the profound indigo of true twilight. You are standing in a place that feels like the very definition of in the middle of nowhere, a landscape so immense it seems to swallow sound itself. The air is still and carries the dry, peppery scent of spinifex grass and sun-baked rock. You trudge slowly, the soft crunch of sand and pebbles under your boots, the only consistent rhythm in this deep quiet. In your hand, you feel the weight of it, though. It's heavier than you expected, solid and dense, a piece of beautifully shaped wood that fits the curve of your palm as if it were grown for you. You run your thumb over its surface. It's not the cheap, lacquered plywood of a tourist souvenir. This is real. The wood is smooth from use, not varnish, and you can feel the subtle grain, the almost imperceptible imperfections that speak of its journey from a living tree to the tool you now hold. This is a boomerang. But you need to clear your mind of the cartoon image, the spinning toy that magically flies back to the thrower. The object in your hand is a weapon. It's a key. It's a piece of sophisticated engineering, perfected over a span of time so vast it makes the Roman Empire look like a weekend pop-up event. This tool, or something very much like it, has been used on this continent for, at the very least, 20,000 years. That's a mainstream historical fact, grounded in archaeological discoveries that push the date back further with each passing decade. To put that in perspective, this technology was being refined while our European ancestors were still dodging woolly mammoths and living in caves. The Great Pyramids of Giza are newcomers by comparison, barely 4,500 years old. Here in your hand you hold a direct link to the Pleistocene epoch. No user manual, no USB-C charging port, just pure lethal design. You look around at the landscape again and the scale of it is almost intimidating. The horizon seems impossibly distant, dotted with the dark, twisted shapes of ghost gums and acacia trees. How could anyone navigate this, let alone survive and thrive? Your phone's GPS gave up the ghost hours ago and every direction looks identical. It's a humbling thought. Yet for tens of thousands of years, the ancestors of the first peoples of Australia read this land like a detailed map. They didn't just survive. They built a complex, vibrant culture that is, by any measure, the oldest continuous culture on the planet. They understood this place, its plants, its animals, its seasons, its spirit, with an intimacy you can barely comprehend. A quirky little tidbit for you. Aboriginal pathfinding was so advanced that it often incorporated what are known as song lines, or dreaming tracks, invisible pathways that crisscross the entire continent. A person could navigate for hundreds, even thousands of kilometers by singing a specific song that described the landscape, the waterholes, the sacred sites, and the turns to take. The land itself was the sheet music. As you stand there feeling small under the emerging stars, you can almost sense the echoes of that knowledge. You look at the boomerang again. Was it for hunting the kangaroos you can hear rustling in the scrubland nearby? Or the emus whose tracks you saw in the dust earlier? Perhaps. The purpose of these tools is a source of endless fascination and study. In fact, historians still argue whether the stunningly beautiful and ancient rock art found in places like Arnhem Land depicts literal hunting scenes, or if they are more complex symbolic representations of creation stories from the Dreamtime. Are you looking at a practical guide to hunting or a sacred text painted on stone? The answer is probably both. That duality is key. Nothing in this ancient world was ever just one thing. A tool was also a story. A landmark was also an ancestor. A hunt was also a ceremony. The boomerang feels cool in your hand now as the night air begins to assert itself. The silence has deepened, and the sky is now peppered with more stars than you've ever seen in your life. A brilliant, shimmering dust of distant suns. There's no light pollution here to wash them out. You are utterly, completely, and perhaps a little terrifyingly alone. Or are you? You feel the presence of the past, the immense weight of the countless generations who stood where you stand now, holding a tool just like this one, looking up at these same stars. They knew how to use it. They knew how to make it, how to read the wind, how to aim for a moving target in the half-light of dawn. For you, it's a beautifully inert object. For them, it was the difference between an empty stomach and a full one, between life and death. It's not a toy. It's a legacy carved from wood. You turn the cool, dense wood over in your hands, the starlight giving its surface a faint silvery sheen. The question that has been lurking in the back of your mind, planted there by years of cartoons and cultural osmosis, finally surfaces. If you threw this, would it come back? You imagine the act, a powerful, spinning throw out into the immense darkness. You can almost hear the whirring sound as it cuts through the air, see its dark silhouette against the star-dusted sky. And then what? Do you hold out your hand and expect it to slap back into your palm like a well-trained puppy? The simple, and perhaps slightly disappointing answer is no, absolutely not. In fact, if the tool you buy holding is what it feels like, a genuine hunting weapon, the last thing you would want is for it to come hurtling back at you. That would be a rather spectacular design flaw, like a rifle that shoots backwards half the time. This is the first and most fundamental truth you need to understand, the great boomerang lie that has been sold to the world. The iconic circular flying returning boomerang is the exception, not the rule. It's the novelty act, the highly specialized, lighter cousin to the serious piece of hardware you're holding right now. It is estimated that over 90% of the boomerangs used across Australia for millennia were of the non-returning variety. The tool in your hand is a kylie, or a hunting stick. It is heavier, often larger and more robustly built. Its purpose is not to perform a graceful aerial ballet. Its purpose is to fly straight, fast, and true over a significant distance. We are talking up to 200 meters, and to connect with a target with enough kinetic energy to knock it down. It's a precision projectile designed for maximum impact. Think of it less as a frisbee and more as a flat spinning axe head. The very word we use, boomerang, is itself a product of a specific, localized encounter. It's a mainstream historical fact that the term is an anglicized version of a word, perhaps boomerini, or Boomerang, from the language of the Turawal or Darug people who lived in the area that is now Sydney. When Captain Cook and his crew first saw these objects in 1770, this was the local name they picked up on. The name stuck, and through the powerful mechanism of colonial storytelling was applied to every single throwing stick across a continent of over 250 distinct indigenous language groups, each of whom had their own specific names for their own specific tools. In the Western Desert, it might be a karli, in other regions a whirlkey. By using the single word boomerang, we inadvertently erase a continent's worth of linguistic and cultural diversity, boiling it all down to a single, simple idea. So what about the returning kind, the ones you see in souvenir shops? They did exist, of course, but they were different. Lighter, more delicately balanced, often with a more pronounced V-shape and a more complex aerodynamic profile. Their purpose is the subject of considerable discussion. Anthropologists still debate whether the returning boomerang evolved from the hunting boomerang as a playful offshoot, or if it was developed independently for a very specific purpose. They certainly weren't used for hunting large game. Throwing your carefully crafted lightweight tool at a kangaroo would be a great way to lose your tool, and just mildly annoy the kangaroo. Instead, they were likely used to startle birds from trees, flushing them out into nets strung up between other hunters. Or they were used in ceremonies, their unique buzzing flight path a spectacle of sound and motion. Or perhaps they were just for fun, a demonstration of incredible skill and an intimate understanding of physics. It turns out your entire childhood conception of a boomerang was based on the ceremonial parade version, not the battlefield tank. You feel the heft of the object in your hand again. This one is the tank. It's a tool of profound practicality. You can see how its long, flat shape would be perfect for digging into the hard earth to find tubers or water. You could use the sharp edge for cutting or scraping. Two of them clapped together would make a sharp, percussive sound, a key part of musical ceremonies. And, of course, you could throw it. The skill involved is something you can barely fathom. A hunter wouldn't just throw it at an animal. As a quirky and frankly brilliant tidbit, some hunters perfected a technique of deliberately bouncing these heavy boomerangs off the ground. They could calculate the angle needed to make the spinning weapon skid across the hard-packed earth and trip up a running emu or wallaby, tangling in its legs and bringing it down. This isn't just a throw. It's a game of physics and angles played out across the terrain itself. Imagine trying that. You'd wind up, give it your best shot, and the boomerang would sail off beautifully for 50 yards before unceremoniously thudding into the dirt. Then you'd have to do the long, embarrassing walk of shame to go pick it up, all while your dinner hops away, probably laughing at you. For the men and women who depended on this, the throw was an extension of their will, a lethal projection of their knowledge of the wind, the land, and the anatomy of their prey. The whirring sound it made in flight wasn't just a side effect, it was part of the weapon, mimicking the sound of a swooping eagle or hawk, causing a moment of panic and confusion in a flock of birds or a grazing marsupial. It's a piece of psychological warfare carved from wood. So, as you stand there in the deepening night, you recalibrate your understanding. The magic of the boomerang isn't that it comes back. The magic is that in the right hands, it doesn't have to. Its job is to arrive. Its job is to arrive. You let that thought settle as you stare into the darkness where you might have thrown it. It's a profound shift in perspective. You are not holding a toy defined by its return journey, but a projectile defined by its final destination. This understanding deepens your connection to the object, but it also opens up a new line of inquiry. For how long has this tool been making that one-way trip? You recall the number mentioned earlier, 20,000 years. It's a number so large it's almost meaningless, an abstraction your brain struggles to anchor. So let's try to build some anchors. Recorded history, the kind that starts with writing in Mesopotamia, is about 5,000 years old. The Great Wall of China, Stonehenge, the pyramids you were thinking of earlier. These are all monuments from within that tiny, recent sliver of human experience. Now multiply that entire span of recorded history by 4. That's how long people have been using, refining, and perfecting the tool you're holding. It is a technology that predates the invention of agriculture, the domestication of animals, and the founding of the world's first cities. When you think about ancient artifacts, you probably picture pottery shards, stone arrowheads, maybe a bronze sword. Our descendants, digging up our own civilization, will probably find mountains of plastic and the fossilized remains of first-generation iPhones, concluding we were a society that worshipped rectangles and had a weird fixation on fidget spinners. But wood is different. Wood rots, disappears, returns to the earth. Finding a wooden artifact that's thousands of years old is incredibly rare, requiring freak conditions of preservation, like being buried in a peat bog or a perpetually dry cave. This makes the story of the boomerang difficult to trace through artifacts alone. But we don't need a complete fossil record because we have something better: a gallery. In the Kimberley region of Western Australia, on the ancient weathered rock faces, there are galleries of art so old they defy belief. The Guion paintings, also known as the Bradshaw figures, are elegant, elongated figures painted in deep red ochre. They are depicted with intricate headdresses, sashes, and crucially, holding bundles of spears and boomerangs. A mainstream historical fact for you. Using advanced dating techniques on overlying and underlying wasp nests, scientists have confidently dated some of this art to be at least 7,500 years old. You close your eyes and imagine it. You're not in an open field anymore, but under a vast rock overhang, sheltered from the sun. Your fingers trace the cool, rough surface of the stone, and there they are. Painted figures from a time when the world's sea levels were 100 meters lower and a land bridge still connected Australia to New Guinea. They are hunters, dancers, ceremonial figures, and in their hands is the unmistakable curved shape of a boomerang, identical in form to the one you now hold. This isn't a speculative reconstruction, it's a direct message from the Ice Age. The people of that time wanted to record their world, their culture, their tools, and the boomerang was important enough to be immortalized. The world they lived in was vastly different from the one you're standing in now. It was cooler, wetter, and populated by creatures straight out of a fantasy novel. This was the time of the Australian megafauna. Imagine sharing this landscape not just with kangaroos, but with Procoptodon, the giant short-faced kangaroo that stood 10 feet tall, or the Diprotodon, a rhinoceros-sized wombat. Hunting one of those would have been a bring your A game or become a very large pancake kind of situation. This is the context in which the hunting boomerang was perfected. It was a tool designed to take down game in an ecosystem filled with giants. It's a sobering thought that this elegant, balanced piece of wood was part of an arsenal used to face down creatures that would send most of us running for the nearest heavily fortified building. The timeline of this continent is full of these fascinating shifts. For instance, archaeologists and geneticists still argue whether the dingo, now an iconic Australian animal, was brought to the continent by early Austronesian seafarers around 4,000 years ago, or if an earlier introduction event occurred. What's certain is that for the first 16,000 years, at least, of the boomerang's known existence, there were no dingoes here. The entire hunting strategy, the entire ecosystem was different, yet the tool remained, adaptable and effective through dramatic changes in climate, fauna, and human migration. This wasn't a piece of static technology. It was constantly being adapted, its design principles passed down not through writing, but through observation, practice, and oral tradition over a span of time we would call geological. We think of a long-term plan as saving for retirement. Here, the long-term plan was ensuring that your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchild would know exactly how to shape a piece of wood to feed their family. It's a level of continuity that is simply staggering. The object in your hand isn't just a thing. It's a thought, an idea, an algorithm for survival that has been running for 200 centuries. You run your fingers along the grain of the wood, a pattern of fine, parallel lines that flow around the boomerang's elegant curve. This pattern is a fingerprint of the tree that produced it, a record of its life written in cellulose. This tool didn't come from a factory. It wasn't stamped out by a machine. It was once part of a living, breathing organism, a tree that stood for perhaps a century under the same sun you just watched set. And its creation was not an act of simple carpentry. It was a conversation between a craftsman and the natural world. To understand the boomerang, you have to understand the tree and the profound knowledge required to choose the right one. This is where the 20,000-year-old algorithm begins, with the source code of the forest. Imagine the creator of this tool. He isn't walking into a hardware superstore with a shopping list and a vague idea from a YouTube tutorial. His search is a patient survey of his environment. He is looking for a specific tree, most likely a species of acacia, like the incredibly hard and dense mulga, Acacia anura, or perhaps a tough desert bloodwood. He's not just looking for the right species, he's looking for the right individual tree and the right part of that tree. He needs a piece of wood that already contains the suggestion of a boomerang within it. He might scan the branches high above, looking for one that has grown with the perfect angle and thickness. But the most prized pieces often come from below ground. He might identify a mature mulga and know that at the intersection where the trunk flares out to meet the roots, the wood is naturally curved, incredibly dense, and cross-grained for maximum strength. This is the L-shaped junction between the vertical and horizontal, a natural structural bracket. He is, in essence, reading the tree's soul. He can see the internal stresses, the history of its growth, the direction of its strength, just by looking at the bark, the lean of the trunk, the spread of its roots. Your own attempt to read a tree would likely yield only 2 pieces of information. Yep, that's a tree, and a dog has been here recently. For the craftsman, the tree is a library of potential. Having found the perfect section, the hard work begins. A mainstream historical fact of Australian archaeology is the sophistication of stone toolkits used for woodworking. The craftsman might use a heavy stone axe to carefully cut the chosen piece from the tree, a laborious process requiring precision and stamina. Then, with the rough shape free, he begins the slow, meditative process of shaping. He uses a stone adze, a small, sharpened stone blade attached to a wooden handle. Chip by chip, scrape by scrape, he removes the excess wood, his movements economical and practiced. There are no power tools, no screaming sanders. The only sound is the rhythmic thunk, shh, thunk, shh of stone on wood. It's a process that could take days, a slow reveal of the form hidden within the block. It's like watching a high-resolution image load over a dial-up connection. The final picture is amazing, but you have to have the patience to see it through. As the shape gets closer to the final form, a new element is introduced: fire. This is a brilliant and quirky piece of ancient technology. If the curve isn't quite right, the craftsman won't try to force it and risk snapping the wood. Instead, he'll build a small, hot fire and lay the boomerang in the hot ashes and coals. He gently heats the wood, not to burn it, but to make it pliable, to soften the lignin that holds the wood fibers together. When it's just right, he pulls it out and carefully bends it a little further, correcting the curve. To fix this new shape, he might bury it in cooler sand or quench it, the change in temperature locking the fibers into their new position. This process of fire hardening also makes the wood incredibly durable and resistant to splitting. Ethnobotanists still debate whether the knowledge of specific wood properties, which woods are strong, which are flexible, which respond best to fire, was discovered through millennia of slow, incremental trial and error, or if there was a more structured, almost scientific method of testing and categorizing plants passed down through oral traditions. Was it accidental discovery or a deliberate research program spanning thousands of years? Given the consistency and sophistication of the results, it's hard to believe it was all just happy accidents. Finally, the boomerang is almost complete. He scrapes it smooth, perhaps using the rough skin of a shark or the abrasive surface of a seed pod. He might rub it down with ochre pigments and animal fat, giving it the deep red patina you can still faintly see, a sealant that protects it from the elements. All the while, he is testing its balance, its weight, its feel. He holds it, swings it, feeling for the subtle distribution of mass that will determine its flight. The beautiful, dense object you hold in your hands is the end result of this deep, intimate process. Its power is not just in its shape, but in the memory of the tree, chosen with wisdom and brought to life with fire and stone. The object in your hand, born of a mulga tree, shaped by stone and fire, finally has a proper name. While boomerang has become the generic, catch-all term, this specific type of heavy, non-returning hunting tool is more accurately known in many parts of Australia by a different name. One of the most common, originating from the Noongar people of Western Australia, is Kylie. You are holding a Kylie. Say the word. It feels different, doesn't it? It has a sharp, almost clipped sound to it, a name that feels more like a tool and less like a toy. This is the weapon you were told about back in Section 2, the true workhorse of the Aboriginal arsenal, the 90% of the time reality that was overshadowed by its show-off cousin. The Kylie is the quiet, competent professional. The returning boomerang is the flashy magician who gets all the attention. The design philosophy of the Kylie is one of brutal simplicity and effectiveness. It has one primary function, and its entire form is dedicated to perfecting it. In a world of smart devices with a million confusing settings, the Kylie is refreshingly straightforward. It has one button, and that button is labeled Launch. Its purpose is to fly as far and as flat as possible, and to arrive with devastating force. To achieve this, its physical characteristics are markedly different from a returning boomerang. The Kylie is generally heavier, crafted from that dense mulga heartwood we talked about. Its arms are often, though not always, more symmetrical in shape and weight. The cross-section of each arm is a much shallower curve, sometimes almost flat on one side. All of these features are deliberate design choices engineered to maximize stability and minimize the aerodynamic quirks that would cause it to loop back. You can think of it this way. The Returning Boomerang is the esoteric art house indie film of the throwing stick world. It's complex, follows a looping, unpredictable narrative, and only a select few truly understand what's going on. The Kylie, on the other hand, is the big-budget summer blockbuster. It's loud, fast, travels in a straight line, and ends with a massive impact. There's no ambiguity in its mission. When thrown, a Kylie doesn't soar, it scythes. It cuts through the air, spinning on its vertical axis for gyroscopic stability, maintaining a remarkably flat trajectory over 100 meters or more. The energy it carries is immense. A direct hit from a heavy hunting Kylie could easily break the leg of a kangaroo or shatter the bones in a human arm. This raw power leads to an interesting discussion. Military historians and archaeologists still argue whether the largest and heaviest of these hunting boomerangs were used primarily as long-range projectiles or as fearsome club-like weapons in close-quarters combat. The answer, as is often the case with such versatile tools, is almost certainly both. Its weight made it a formidable bludgeon, and the curved shape was perfectly designed for hooking around a shield or a limb in a fight. It was both a missile and a sword, a testament to the efficiency of carrying one tool that could perform multiple life or death functions. The ingenuity didn't stop there, and as a quirky and slightly terrifying tidbit, some Aboriginal groups developed a specialized version of the Kylie with a hook or a beak carved into one end. This wasn't for decoration. This hooked Kylie was designed to be even more lethal. When thrown, it flew with the same flat, spinning trajectory, but the hook dramatically increased the chances of snagging its target. If the main body of the Kylie missed by an inch, the hook might still catch a leg or a wing, tumbling the weapon and causing catastrophic damage. In a fight, it was even more fearsome, capable of catching an opponent's neck or limb. It was the Swiss Army knife of causing someone a very, very bad day. This wasn't a primitive stick. It was an evolving weapon system, adapted and modified for maximum effectiveness. You look down at the smooth, clean curve of the Kylie in your hand. It has no hook. It's a classic, elegant design. You run your thumb along its leading edge. It's not knife-sharp, but it's tapered to a thin, hard rim, designed to cut through the air with minimal drag. You feel its weight, its perfect centered balance. Every single millimeter of its surface, every gram of its mass, is the result of a deliberate choice, a calculation made by the craftsman to create a predictable, reliable, and deadly tool. This was the provider, the defender, the constant companion. The returning boomerang might have captured the imagination of the world, but the humble, straight-flying Kylie is the one that truly shaped the lives of the people who mastered it, ensuring their survival for generation after generation. It is the unsung hero, and now you know its name. Now you know its name and you know its purpose. But the deepest secrets of the Kylie, and indeed of all boomerangs, are not written on its surface in ochre. They are carved into its very geometry. You've understood its mission, but now it's time to understand its method. How does this piece of wood, seemingly so simple, fly with such stability and power? The answer is not magic. It's a masterclass in fluid dynamics, an intuitive grasp of physics that is nothing short of genius. To begin, I want you to focus on just one of the two arms, or wings, of the Kylie you're holding. Hold it so you're looking down its length. Now run your thumb across the top surface and your index finger along the bottom. Do it a few times. Feel the difference? It isn't a perfectly symmetrical piece of wood. You'll notice one side is distinctly curved, a gentle convex arc, while the other side is significantly flatter, almost completely flat in some cases. What you are feeling is an airfoil. It's the same fundamental shape that you would find if you took a cross-section of an airplane wing. This is the engine of the boomerang. This is where the invisible force of lift is generated. The craftsman who shaped this wood thousands of years ago was, in effect, a wing designer. He knew, either through tradition or observation, that this specific asymmetric curve was the key to flight. The principle at work here is one you might have learned in a high school physics class, right before you fell asleep or started doodling in your textbook. It's often explained by Bernoulli's principle. Now, trying to explain the finer points of Bernoulli's principle at a party is a great way to find yourself suddenly standing alone. But the basic idea is beautifully simple. As air flows over the boomerang's arm, it splits, with some air going over the curved top and some going under the flat bottom. The air traveling over the longer curved path has to move faster to meet up with the air at the back edge at the same time. Faster moving air exerts less pressure. This creates a pressure differential. Higher pressure underneath, lower pressure on top. The result? The wing is pushed upwards. It generates lift. This is a mainstream scientific fact, formally published by the Swiss mathematician Daniel Bernoulli in 1738. And it is, without a doubt, one of the most important principles in the history of engineering. It's what gets a 400-ton jumbo jet off the ground. And here it is, perfectly and expertly rendered in a piece of mulga wood, a technology that predates Bernoulli by at least 20,000 years. It's a humbling realization. We need wind tunnels and supercomputers to design an efficient wing. The Aboriginal craftsman needed a good piece of stone, a keen eye, and a body of knowledge passed down through the generations. Now, to be fair to modern science, the process is a little more complex than just that. Aerodynamicists still debate the precise contribution of various factors to lift. Is it primarily the pressure differential described by Bernoulli? Or does the downward deflection of air as it's pushed away by the wing, a simple action-reaction explained by Newton's third law, play an equal or greater role? The truth is, both are happening at once, along with other subtle effects. One of these, a quirky little deep cut in fluid dynamics, is called the Coanda effect. This is the observed tendency for a jet of fluid, or in this case air, to be attracted to a nearby surface and stick to it. The air moving over the top of the boomerang S-wing wants to cling to that convex curve, which helps guide the airflow downwards, enhancing the lift. So when you hold this Kylie, you're holding a device that expertly manipulates Bernoulli's principle, Newton's third law, and the Coanda effect. Every scrape of that stone tool we imagined earlier was about refining this shape, getting that curve just right. A millimeter too thick, and it would create too much drag. A millimeter too flat, and it wouldn't generate enough lift. The Kylie is a very judgy piece of wood. It knows if you've done the work correctly. Each of its arms is a wing, and as it spins through the air, these two wings work in harmony to keep it aloft, allowing it to cover vast distances with minimal loss of altitude. The straight-flying Kylie is engineered for stable, efficient lift, keeping it on a flat, predictable path toward its target. The returning boomerang uses this exact same principle of lift, but with a few crucial, mind-bending twists that we will get to later. For now, just appreciate the sheer elegance of the solution. You are not holding a stick. You are holding two wings, joined at the center, a miniature unpowered aircraft of staggering antiquity and sophistication. You're holding this elegant two-winged object, and you now understand that each of those wings is an airfoil, a marvel of carving designed to generate lift. But this raises a fundamental question. Why two wings joined in the middle? Why not just a single, straight throwing stick shaped like one wing? Why the characteristic V-shape, and why is it always thrown with a spin? To answer that, I want you to perform a little thought experiment. Imagine trying to throw a wooden ruler, say, 30 yards. You hurl it as hard as you can. What happens? It tumbles end over end, flapping chaotically through the air like a wounded bird, and lands just a few feet away. Now, imagine throwing a frisbee with no spin. It just lurches forward and dives straight into the ground. Spin is the second half of the equation. The airfoil shape gives the boomerang the potential for flight, but it's the spin that gives it stability. The moment it leaves the hunter's hand, the boomerang is spinning rapidly, and this rotation turns the entire object into a gyroscope. You've seen this principle in action 100 times. A spinning top that stays perfectly upright while in motion, but topples the second it stops. The wheel of a bicycle, which is incredibly stable when spinning at speed but impossible to balance when stationary. A spinning object possesses something called angular momentum, which is a wonderfully complex term for a very simple idea. It wants to keep spinning in the same orientation. It actively resists being tilted or pushed off its axis. The boomerang's spin is its onboard stabilization system, providing more reliable balance than a toddler who's just had a large juice box. This gyroscopic effect is what allows it to slice cleanly through the air instead of tumbling. It's what allows it to fight against crosswinds and pockets of turbulence, maintaining its intended course. The physics that formally describe this motion were worked out in the mid-19th century by a French physicist named Léon Foucault, who invented and named the gyroscope to demonstrate the Earth's rotation. It's a mainstream historical fact that his work laid the foundation for the navigation systems now used in airplanes, submarines, and even your smartphone. And it's another one of those beautiful moments of cosmic irony. The essential principle of Foucault's multi-million-dollar inertial guidance systems was perfected tens of thousands of years earlier by a craftsman who simply wanted his lunch to stop running away. Foucault got the Nobel Prize, but the original inventors just called it the trick that stops the wobbly bit. And the spin we're talking about is not a gentle, lazy rotation. As a quirky tidbit for you, a well-thrown boomerang can achieve a spin rate of up to 10 revolutions per second. That's 600 RPM. This incredible speed is what creates its powerful gyroscopic stability. It's also what generates the boomerang's distinctive sound. Not a whoosh, but a sharp, menacing whir or buzz as it cuts through the air. This sound, as we've touched on, was a weapon in itself, startling prey and adding a psychological edge to the hunt. The spin isn't just for balance, it's the engine that makes the airfoils work. The wings aren't just moving forward. They are slicing through the air at high speed because of the rotation, which allows them to generate significant lift even at a relatively low forward velocity. It's a spinning wing, a miniature helicopter blade flying sideways. The interplay between the forward speed of the throw and the rotational speed of the spin is a delicate and complex dance. Physicists and engineers who study boomerang flight still debate the optimal rate of spin versus forward velocity for different boomerang designs. Is there a perfect ratio that maximizes range and stability? And did ancient craftsmen have an intuitive feel for achieving this sweet spot through the design of the tool and the technique of the throw? It seems almost certain that they did. A hunter would know that a heavy Kylie for a kangaroo needed a powerful throw with a slightly slower, more robust spin, while a lighter boomerang for birds might require a faster, snappier spin. This wasn't something you could calculate on a blackboard. It was knowledge held in the muscles and nerves honed over a lifetime of practice. So now you have the two core secrets. The airfoil shape of the wings creates lift, and the gyroscopic action of the spin provides unwavering stability. For the straight-flying Kylie you're holding, these two principles combine to create the perfect projectile. It flies straight, holds its altitude, resists the wind, and arrives on target with all the energy you put into it. It's a masterpiece of applied physics, a perfect fusion of aerodynamic lift and gyroscopic stability. And it's this very fusion that, with a few subtle tweaks to the design, creates the mind-bending phenomenon of the returning boomerang, a story for a little later. For now, you just need to appreciate the spin. It's the invisible force that turns a simple piece of wood into a true and steady arrow. You're standing there beneath the vast starry sky, holding a masterpiece of ancient engineering. You understand the airfoil that gives it lift. You understand the gyroscopic spin that gives it stability. You have the hardware and the physics down. But there's a missing ingredient. All of this brilliant design is just potential energy, a silent promise locked in wood. To unlock it, to turn this inert object into a flying, spinning projectile, you need the software. You need the technique. You need the throw. And the throw is every bit as sophisticated and perfected as the tool itself. The most advanced piece of technology you've ever thrown is probably a crumpled up piece of paper at a trash can from across the room. When it goes in, you celebrate like you've just won a championship, but you know it was 90% luck. For the Aboriginal hunter, there was no luck involved. There was only skill. First, the grip. You can't just grab it like a club. You hold the Kylie at the very end of one of its wings in what's known as a pinch grip. You place your thumb flat against the flatter side of the airfoil, and your first one or two fingers curl around the curved leading edge. The Kylie hangs downwards from your hand, almost parallel to your leg. The most important part, and the most counterintuitive for a beginner, is the orientation. You hold it vertically or close to it with the curved elbow pointing forward. You do not hold it flat like a frisbee. Throwing it horizontally is the universal sign of someone who has no idea what they're doing. It would just flutter up into the air and then crash to the ground, and you'd probably stand there for a second looking at it, then look back at the Kylie in your hand and blame the equipment. Now the motion, the body coils. You bring the Kylie back behind you, your arm almost straight, your torso twisting, gathering potential energy like a catapult. It's not a jerky baseball pitching motion from the shoulder. It's a smooth, rotational, full body movement. The power comes from the ground up, through your legs and your core. Your arm is the final whip, the trebuchet sling that will release the projectile. As you begin to swing forward, your arm accelerates, sweeping around in a wide, powerful arc. And then, at the very last moment, just as the Kylie is about to leave your fingers, the most important action of all occurs: the snap. It's an explosive flick of the wrist. This is the source of the high-speed spin. The arm provides the forward velocity, but it's this sharp, almost violent wrist action that imparts the incredible angular momentum we talked about, the 600 revolutions per minute. It's the original and most critical application of the advice. It's all in the wrist. This specific technique is not speculation. It's a mainstream historical fact, documented in early ethnographic films and records. Anthropologists in the late 19th and early 20th centuries had the foresight to film and photograph Aboriginal men demonstrating these throws, preserving the exact biomechanics of a skill that had been passed down for millennia. These films show the same vertical hold, the same rotational power, and the same distinctive snap of the wrist, a kinetic signature passed from one generation to the next. In fact, as a quirky tidbit, elders would often teach this crucial wrist snap to children through games. A boy might be asked to flick water as far as he could with his fingertips, or to use a small stick to try and snap a single leaf off a branch without moving his arm, purely a wrist action. It was a way of building that precise, explosive muscle memory long before they ever held a real Kylie. Biomechanical analysts still debate the exact sequence of muscle activation that generates the perfect throw. Is the power primarily generated from the shoulder and torso rotation, with the wrist adding spin, or is it a more complex kinetic chain, where power is transferred sequentially from the legs all the way to the fingertips? The complexity of the motion is such that it's still being studied. Imagine that. A simple throw, so refined and so efficient that it remains a subject of modern scientific inquiry. You try to mentally rehearse it. The grip, the vertical orientation, the slow coil of the body, the explosive release, ending with that sharp, decisive snap. You can almost feel the Kylie rip from your fingers, hear the sudden zzz-zing as it bites into the air next to your ear. You see it fly, not tumbling but spinning perfectly in a near vertical plane, a flat whirring disc slicing through the night, straight and true, for 100 meters. It doesn't wobble, it doesn't falter. It flies with the terrifying purpose for which it was designed. The wood is the vessel, the physics are the rules, but the throw is the life force. It is the human element, the ghost in the machine. The human element, the throw, brings the Kylie to life as a weapon. But what about when the hunt is over? What happens when the day's food has been secured and the hunters return to camp? Does this finely crafted object simply get leaned against a rock until it's needed again? In our world of hyper-specialized gadgets, that's what we'd expect. A hammer is a hammer. A screwdriver is a screwdriver. But in the world that created the Kylie, an object so rich in embedded knowledge and requiring so much effort to create, could never have just one purpose. It had to earn its keep in every facet of life. The Kylie is the original multi-tool, the ancestral Swiss Army knife, a spork of lethal elegance. What you're holding is not just a weapon, it's a key to the cultural and spiritual life of a people. Imagine you have two of them. You hold one in each hand, you strike their flat sides together. The sound is not a dull thud, it's a sharp, loud, and surprisingly resonant clack. The dense, fire-hardened mulga wood acts like the body of a drum. This sound is the heartbeat of ceremony. As a mainstream ethnomusicological fact, boomerangs, or specialized clapsticks made in the same way, are the primary percussion instrument for countless Aboriginal groups across the continent. They provide the driving, intricate rhythms for song and dance, a steady anchor for the soaring voice of the songman and the rhythmic stomp of the dancer's feet. You can close your eyes and almost hear it. The crackle of a central fire, the chanting voices rising and falling in complex harmony, and underneath it all, that relentless, hypnotic beat. Clack, 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 clack. The dancers, their bodies painted with white clay and ochre, might even carry boomerangs themselves, incorporating them into the movements of the story they are telling. A great hunt, a journey of an ancestral being, a story from the dream time. Those figures in the ancient rock art holding their boomerangs, perhaps they weren't just posing for a pre-hunt team photo. Perhaps they were dancing. The boomerang's connection to sound goes even further than percussion. As a truly fascinating and quirky tidbit, some craftsmen would deliberately engineer boomerangs to create specific sounds in flight. They would carve small notches, pits, or grooves along the leading edge of the wings. When thrown, as the air rushes over these carved indentations, it creates a distinct low humming or high-pitched whistling sound. These whistling boomerangs weren't designed for hunting. Their sound would scare away any potential prey. They were acoustic instruments, designed to be heard. In a ceremony, the sound of a whistling boomerang overhead could signal the start of a ritual, announce the arrival of initiated men, or most powerfully, represent the voice of a sky spirit or an ancestral being. It was the original event notification, a sound from the heavens that commanded attention and respect. The object's role wasn't just auditory, it was symbolic. A man might own several boomerangs of different types, his personal toolkit for hunting, fighting, and ceremony. A beautifully made and decorated boomerang could be a symbol of his status and skill as a provider and craftsman. In some groups, large, non-throwing boomerang-like objects were used as ceremonial emblems, functioning almost like a scepter or a sign of office for a respected elder. And in the most profound moments of life, the boomerang was there. Historians and anthropologists still debate the ceremonial significance of boomerang breaking. In some funeral ceremonies, a deceased man's most important tools, including his boomerangs, would be ritually broken. Was this a sign of severing the physical ties to the world, a way of releasing his spirit from its earthly tasks, or a symbolic gesture that his life's hunt was finally over? We may never know the precise meaning, but its presence at the final rite of passage speaks volumes about its importance. You look at the Kylie in your hand. An hour ago, it was a weapon. Now you can see it as a drumstick, a dancer's prop, a ceremonial wand, a spirit's voice, a tombstone. Our most sacred cultural objects are things like flags, religious texts, or the sacred television remote that must never, ever be lost between the couch cushions. The Aboriginal worldview was more integrated. The sacred and the profane, the practical and the spiritual, were not separate categories. They were woven together, and an object like the Kylie existed in both realms simultaneously. Its true power wasn't just that it could fly straight, but that it could connect the world of the living with the world of the spirit, providing sustenance for the body and rhythm for the soul. Its ability to serve both the body and the spirit makes the Kylie a profoundly versatile object. But the list of its duties doesn't end with hunting and ceremony. You're still standing in the vast, quiet darkness, and the air is getting colder. A fire would be welcome. A hot meal would be even better. The Kylie in your hand can provide both, without ever leaving the ground. Its utility is woven into the very fabric of daily survival, covering tasks that are mundane, essential, and sometimes even surprising. In a nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyle, you don't have the luxury of a shed full of tools. Every object you carry must be a multitasker, and the Kylie is the undisputed champion. First, imagine you're hungry, but the kangaroos are nowhere to be seen. You know, however, that beneath the hard-baked earth at your feet are sweet, starchy yams or the burrows of small, edible marsupials. You take the Kylie, grip it firmly by one end, and use the other pointed tip as a pick. The fire-hardened mulga wood we talked about, the wood chosen for its incredible density, is more than strong enough to break up the dry, compacted soil. You drive the tip into the ground, leveraging the curve of the Kylie to pry up chunks of earth. It becomes a miniature pickaxe and a shovel, an extension of your arm that can dig for hours without breaking. Its shape, which seems so specialized for flight, is actually wonderfully ergonomic for this task as well, fitting comfortably in the hand and allowing you to apply significant force. Once you've dug up your meal, you need to cook it. But you have no matches, no lighter. You have the Kylie. This is one of its most ingenious applications. A mainstream documented fact of Aboriginal technology is the use of the fire saw method. You would need another piece of wood, something much softer like a dried banksia stem or a piece of grass tree. You lay the soft wood on the ground, perhaps carving a small groove in it. Then you take your Kylie, turn it on its side, and use its hard, narrow edge as the saw. You place the edge in the groove and begin rubbing it back and forth, rapidly, applying firm downward pressure. At first, nothing happens. Then a wisp of smoke and the smell of hot wood. You go faster. A fine dark dust begins to pile up at the end of the groove. This dust gets hotter and hotter from the friction, until finally, a tiny glowing red spark, an ember, is born within the pile. You gently tip this ember into a prepared bundle of dry grass and bark and blow on it softly until it bursts into flame. It sounds simple. Try it yourself sometime. You're far more likely to end up with a blister in a pile of lukewarm wood shavings than a roaring fire. It is a technique of immense skill, a testament to a deep understanding of friction, insulation, and the properties of different woods. Now you have your fire and you've cooked your food, perhaps a goanna, a large lizard baked directly in the hot coals and ash. How do you eat it? The Kylie is there for you again. As a wonderfully practical, quirky tidbit, the clean, curved inner surface of the Boomerang serves as a perfect multi-tool for food preparation. You can use its sharpened edge to help butcher the animal, and then use the broad, concave surface as a makeshift tray or scraper to scoop the cooked meat out of the ashes and away from the skin. It's your plate and your serving spoon, all in one. It's the original solution to single-use packaging, except this one is reusable for 20,000 years. Beyond food and fire, the Kylie even played a role in maintaining social order. When disputes arose, they couldn't always be solved with a quiet chat. Sometimes, a more formal, physical resolution was required. This is where the Kylie's function as a weapon was ritualized. Instead of a chaotic brawl, two men might agree to a formal duel. Legal scholars and anthropologists still debate the extent to which these non-lethal duels were used to settle disputes. Were they common, legally binding resolutions, or rarer measures for serious grievances? In many of these contests, the rules were strict. Blows might only be allowed to the thigh, for example. The goal was not to kill, but to prove one's strength and resolve to draw blood and satisfy honor, thereby ending the conflict. It was a way of managing violence within a society, a stark contrast to our modern method of dispute resolution, which usually involves leaving a passive-aggressive comment on the internet. So you look down at the object one more time. It's a pickaxe. It's a fire starter. It's a dinner plate. It's a judge's gavel. And yes, it's a weapon. It is a complete survival system, elegantly disguised as a single piece of wood. It's a complete survival system. You hold the Kylie in your hand and feel the weight of all its identities: hunter, musician, shovel, fire starter, symbol. It feels so completely, so inextricably linked to the red earth beneath your feet, a product of this unique continent. The story seems whole, self-contained, written entirely under the Southern Cross. And it's at this moment of perfect, comfortable understanding that the story takes a sharp, disorienting turn. I want you to let your mind drift away from this warm Australian night. Let it float up, out of the atmosphere, and watch the continent of Australia shrink below you. You fly across the Indian Ocean, over the landmass of Asia, and towards the heart of Europe. Now let time rewind, not just by a few centuries, but by 30,000 years. You are plunging back into the coldest depths of the last ice age. The world you land in is unrecognizably harsh. The air is thin and bitterly cold. Vast sheets of ice, miles thick, grind slowly over the northern parts of the continent. Where you stand, in what will one day be southern Poland, the landscape is a rolling, semi-frozen tundra, dotted with hardy pine and birch trees. Herds of woolly mammoths, their shaggy coats protecting them from the biting wind, move slowly across the plains, their tusks curving majestically towards the pale, weak sun. You are not in the outback anymore. You take shelter from the wind in the mouth of a limestone cave, nestled in the side of a river valley. This is Oblazowa Cave, in the Carpathian Mountains. The place feels ancient, a refuge for animals and, as you see from the scatter of flint chips and charred bone, for humans. Now fast forward to the year 1985. An archaeological team is painstakingly working in this very cave. They are digging through the layers of earth that form the cave floor, a compressed timeline of millennia of occupation. They find what they expect to find: flint tools, the bones of cave bears and reindeer, evidence of Paleolithic hunters. And then, they find something they absolutely do not expect. It's not a spear point, it's not a stone scraper. It's a beautifully carved, elegantly curved object about 30 inches long. It looks, for all the world, exactly like a boomerang. It's like digging up a Roman ruin and finding a perfectly preserved Viking longship inside. It simply doesn't belong. This discovery is not a fringe theory or a hoax. It is a stunning mainstream archaeological fact. The object, when tested, was found to be carved, not from wood, but from the tusk of a woolly mammoth. Using radiocarbon dating, it was determined to be approximately 30,000 years old. 30,000. That makes it, by a significant margin, the oldest confirmed boomerang ever discovered anywhere in the world. It predates the Australian rock art depictions by more than 12,000 years. This quintessential symbol of Australia, it turns out, has an ancestor from Ice Age Poland, made from the tusk of an extinct elephant. The choice of material is in itself a bit of a flex by the creator. Mammoth ivory is incredibly dense and difficult to carve. Using it to make a boomerang is the Paleolithic equivalent of crafting your phone case from solid titanium or carbon fiber. It's a display of supreme skill and access to the most prized of raw materials. The discovery blows the simple, clean narrative of the boomerang right out of the water. This wasn't just an Australian invention. It appears to be an idea, a piece of technology, that arose independently in the Northern Hemisphere during the Upper Paleolithic. But what was it for? Archaeologists still debate the exact function of the Oblazowa boomerang. Was it a hunting weapon used to bring down the fast-moving reindeer and Arctic hares that lived here? Tests with replicas have shown it to be a highly effective projectile. Or was it a ritual object, perhaps associated with the powerful mammoth hunting cults that are known to have existed at the time? Or was it, as some have suggested, something else entirely? A musical instrument, a ceremonial item, or even a high-status toy? As a quirky little tidbit to add to the mystery, the cave also yielded other treasures, including an ancient bone spearhead and what is believed to be the oldest confirmed bone of a modern human from this specific region. The Oblazowa boomerang wasn't an anomaly in a cultural vacuum. It was part of the toolkit of a sophisticated, well-established people. You mentally compare the two objects, the wooden kylie in your hands, warm and organic, and this imagined ivory boomerang, cold, dense, and fossilized. The materials are worlds apart. The continents are worlds apart. The time separating their creation is vast, and yet the shape is unmistakably the same. The gentle curve, the tapered ends, the likely airfoil cross-section. It's a breathtaking example of convergent evolution in technology. The same problems of flight and physics were being solved by human minds, using local materials in staggeringly different parts of the world. The story of the boomerang just got a whole lot bigger. The story of the boomerang just got a whole lot bigger. That 30,000-year-old mammoth tusk from Poland is not an endpoint. It's a new beginning, a clue that suggests the tale of the curved throwing stick is a tangled, global epic, not a simple linear biography. It forces you to ask the question, if it was in Poland, where else might it have been? Let's leave the cold Ice Age cave and travel forward in time again, to around 3,300 years ago. Our destination is the sun-scorched, vibrant land of ancient Egypt, in the Valley of the Kings. You find yourself standing in the antechamber of a newly discovered tomb, the air thick with the dust of millennia. This is the tomb of the boy king, Tutankhamun, and it is less a grave and more the world's most opulent storage unit, packed with everything a pharaoh might possibly need for a comfortable afterlife. Amid the golden chariots, the jewel-encrusted thrones, and the alabaster jars, you see them. a whole collection of elegantly curved sticks. The discovery of dozens of these throwing sticks in Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 is a cornerstone mainstream fact of Egyptology. They were not crude implements. Many were exquisitely crafted from ebony and ivory, some decorated with gold foil or intricate painted scenes. They are undeniably relatives of the kylie in your hand, and we know exactly how they were used, because the Egyptians helpfully painted user manuals on the walls of other tombs. Imagine a scene, preserved in vibrant pigment for 3,000 years. The pharaoh stands gracefully on a flat-bottomed boat made of papyrus reeds gliding through the dense marshes of the Nile. His queen stands behind him holding lotus flowers. All around them the air is alive with birds, ducks, geese, herons. The pharaoh's arm is drawn back and in his hand is one of these curved sticks. He is hunting. The stick would be thrown into a panicked flock of birds as they took flight, the spinning weapon tumbling through the air to break wings and bring down several birds with a single, skillful throw. It was the sport of kings, an elegant display of prowess. It's certainly a bit more refined than our modern equivalent, which mostly involves muttering angrily at pigeons in a public square. As a quirky tidbit, many of these Egyptian throwing sticks were carved to resemble snakes, or had a serpent's head intricately carved on one end. This wasn't just for style. The snake was a powerful symbol in Egypt, representing the goddess Wadjet, a protector of the pharaoh. A striking cobra was a symbol of lethal divine power. The serpentine flight of the stick through the air likely reminded them of a striking snake, and so the weapon was imbued with its spirit. The tool became a talisman. But this very elegance and symbolism has led to a discussion among scholars. Egyptologists still debate whether Tutankhamun's throwing sticks were purely functional hunting tools he actually used, or if they were primarily symbolic, ritual items placed in the tomb to represent his power over nature in the afterlife. Were they his favorite hunting gear, or were they props for the great cosmic stage? The story doesn't end in Egypt. If you jump across the Atlantic to the arid lands of the American Southwest, you'll find the Hopi and other Pueblo peoples used a very similar tool. Theirs is often called a rabbit stick, a heavy, curved, non-returning throwing stick used with incredible skill to hunt rabbits and other small game in the low scrubland. Travel to southern India, and you'll find traditional communities used a similar tool called the valari. The pattern is remarkable. It seems that wherever you have relatively open country, grassland, desert, marshland, or low scrub, the curved throwing stick appears. It's the perfect technological solution for hunting small, fast-moving game in an environment where a traditional bow and arrow, which can be cumbersome and is more suited to dense forests, is less effective. It was the Stone Age equivalent of everyone independently inventing the selfie stick. The moment the conditions were right, the idea just seemed to pop up everywhere. This is a profound insight. The kylie is not just a tool. It's an answer to an environmental question. It represents a universal thread of human ingenuity. But while the basic, non-returning throwing stick was a global phenomenon, its story seems to fade in most parts of the world. In Egypt, it was eventually replaced by other technologies. In the Americas, its use was limited to specific tribes. It was in Australia, and only in Australia, that this technology was not only preserved but taken to its absolute zenith. Here, it was diversified into hundreds of different forms for different terrains and prey. And it was here that someone, somewhere, thousands of years ago, made the crucial design tweak, the subtle change in the airfoil, and the balance that would create the next almost magical step in its evolution, the boomerang that comes back. The global tour is over. It's time to return to the Australian night and to the mystery of the returning ark. Your global tour is over. You've seen the boomerang quack his ancient ancestor in a Polish cave and its distant cousins in the tomb of a pharaoh. Now, you return to the Australian night, to the place where this story reaches its most complex and fascinating chapter. The kylie in your hand feels familiar again, a solid piece of this land. But its long, quiet history is about to be interrupted. The isolation that allowed this technology to flourish for millennia is about to end. Let's travel back one last time, not to the deep past of the Ice Age, but to a moment so recent it feels like yesterday in comparison. The year is 1770. You are standing not on the red earth, but on the swaying, groaning deck of a wooden ship. The air smells of salt spray, tarred rope, and damp canvas. You are on board His Majesty's bark Endeavour, and you have just sailed into a wide, calm bay on the southeast coast of this vast, unknown continent. This place will one day be called Botany Bay. Through a spyglass, the ship's captain, a meticulous navigator named James Cook, and the wealthy young botanist Joseph Banks are studying the shoreline. They see a small group of men on the beach. These are the Gwigal people of the Darug Nation. They are watching the Endeavour with what you can only imagine is a mixture of curiosity and alarm. To them, this massive, silent ship with its towering masts must look like a floating island, a creature from a strange dream. The men on the shore are armed. They carry long, barbed spears, and in their hands, they hold a curved piece of wood. Cook, in his journal, struggles to find a word for it. The closest object in his European frame of reference is a type of Turkish sword, a mainstream historical fact from the pages of his log. He describes it as a kind of scimitar. It's a description that is both perfectly understandable and completely wrong. It's like landing on a new planet and describing a smartphone as a shiny, talking rock. He's describing the shape, but has absolutely no concept of the function. Historians still debate the nature of that first encounter at Botany Bay. Was the Gwigal men's display of their weapons a gesture of outright aggression, a ritualized warning to the strange invaders, or simply a demonstration of their own strength and presence on their land? What is certain is that the interaction was tense, fraught with the misunderstanding of two worlds colliding. And at some point in this or subsequent encounters, the Europeans saw the scimitar in action. One of the men on the shore hurls the Kylie. It doesn't fly like a spear, arcing high into the air. It flies flat, spinning with incredible speed, covering a huge distance before hitting the ground. You can imagine the sailors on the Endeavour turning to each other in disbelief. A stick that flies? A sword you can throw? Trying to describe that back in a pub in Portsmouth would make you sound like you'd spent a little too long in the sun with the ship's rum. It was an object that defied their categories of technology. It was wood, but it flew like a bird. It was a weapon, but it had no sharp point or cutting edge in the way they understood it. Their initial reaction was a mixture of bewilderment and perhaps a touch of suspicion. Anything that clever, that unexpected, must be some kind of trick. As a quirky and telling tidbit, when the first descriptions of these throwing sticks made it back to Europe, the illustrators who had to draw them based on written accounts got them spectacularly wrong. Early engravings often show Aboriginal men holding things that look like oversized bananas or crescent moons, missing the flat, thin, aerodynamic profile entirely. They couldn't conceive of its true shape because they couldn't grasp its function as an airfoil. It's almost certain that what Cook and his men saw that day was a non-returning hunting Kylie, like the one you hold in your imagination. The returning Boomerang, being a more specialized and less common tool, would have been unlikely to be brandished in a tense standoff. They saw the workhorse, not the magician. But even without witnessing the returning trick, they had seen enough. They had witnessed a piece of Stone Age technology, as they would have termed it, that was, in its own way, more advanced than anything in their own arsenal. A musket could fire a ball in a straight line, but it was useless once fired. This wooden weapon could be thrown and retrieved. It was silent. It was versatile. It was a complete enigma. This moment, in the autumn of 1770, was the beginning of the Boomerang's journey into the global consciousness. It was the instant this ancient, brilliant piece of Aboriginal engineering was discovered by a world that would at once marvel at it, misunderstand it, and ultimately transform it into a caricature of itself. That first encounter at Botany Bay opened the floodgates. The Boomerang, once a localized and deeply understood tool, was now an artifact on the world stage, and its journey through the modern era would be a strange and complicated one. It would be admired, studied, misunderstood, commercialized, and ultimately transformed into a stereotype. The story of what happened next is the story of how the powerful, straight-flying Kylie in your hand was replaced in the global imagination by its lighter, trickier cousin, and how both were flattened into a cartoon. In the decades that followed Cook's arrival, as colonization spread across Australia, the Boomerang entered its first new role, the ethnographic curiosity. You can picture it easily. It's the late 19th century. A returning colonial administrator or a naturalist has the object mounted on the wall of his dusty study in London or Edinburgh. It sits there alongside a collection of exotic butterflies, a Zulu shield, and perhaps a shrunken head from some faraway jungle. It's a trophy of empire, a symbol of a primitive world that is being catalogued and conquered. Its function is secondary to its exoticism. Learned men in tweed jackets might take it down, admire its curve, and speculate wildly about its purpose. But the deep, lived knowledge of the tool is a world away. Then came a stranger phase. As a quirky and surreal tidbit, the late 19th and early 20th century saw a brief but intense fad for boomerang throwing as a gentleman's sport in England and America. Clubs were formed, treatises on the physics of its flight were written, and men in starched collars would gather in parks to test their skill with this exotic implement. They were fascinated by the mechanics of the returning flight, treating it as a scientific puzzle. In a way, it was a form of respect for the genius of the design, but it was a respect completely divorced from its cultural origins. It was like admiring the engineering of a Stradivarius violin but using it as a cricket bat. The context was gone. It was in the 20th century, however, with the rise of mass media and international tourism, that the final transformation occurred. Marketers, looking for simple, powerful symbols to represent the vast and complex continent of Australia, seized upon the boomerang. But not the Kylie. The heavy hunting boomerang was a bit too serious, a bit too much like a weapon. The returning boomerang, on the other hand, was perfect. It was magical. It was playful. It performed a trick. And so, the great boomerang lie we talked about in Section 2 went global. The exception became the rule. A mainstream historical turning point was the 1956 Melbourne Olympics. It was a moment for Australia to present itself to the world, and the boomerang, alongside the kangaroo and the koala, was plastered on every poster, pennant, and tea towel. It was now official. The boomerang was a primary national symbol. The inevitable result was mass production. The authentic, handcrafted Kylie in your hand, made of dense mulga wood and perfected over generations, was replaced by millions of cheap imitations. You've seen them in every airport gift shop. They are made of light, flimsy plywood, often in the wrong shape, and painted with garish, cartoonish designs. Most of them, if thrown, would fly with the aerodynamic grace of a wet banana. They are not tools. They are boomerang-shaped objects, a hollow echo of the real thing. The symbol had consumed the reality. The boomerang became a popular logo for businesses, promising that your luggage, your rental car, or your investment portfolio would always come back. This is the heart of a complex and ongoing discussion. Cultural theorists still debate whether the adoption of the boomerang as a national symbol was a genuine, albeit clumsy, attempt to incorporate Indigenous culture into the Australian identity, or if it was an act of cultural appropriation that trivialized a sacred and complex object for commercial gain. Is it a tribute or is it theft? The answer is probably a messy combination of both. What's undeniable is the irony. An object that represents self-sufficiency, sustainability, and the world's oldest living culture became a mass-produced, disposable trinket. A symbol of deep knowledge became a symbol of tourist kitsch. You clutch the imaginary Kylie in your hand a little tighter. You feel its dense, substantial weight. It has survived. Beneath the layers of misunderstanding, commercialization, and stereotyping, the real object with its real history and its real science is still there. Its story has been obscured but not erased. And the most misunderstood part of its story, the part that ironically fueled its journey into stereotype, is the physics of the returning flight itself. It's time to finally unravel that mystery. It's time to unravel the mystery. You've held the heavy, straight-flying Kylie in your mind for this entire journey. Now I want you to mentally set it down and pick up something different. This is a returning boomerang. It feels lighter in your hand, more delicate. The angle of its V-shape is often sharper, more pronounced. As you run your fingers over its wings, you notice the airfoil curve we talked about is more exaggerated, more aggressively sculpted. The two wings themselves might even be slightly different in length and shape. It is a creature of deliberate asymmetry. This is the magician, the trickster, the object that fueled the global stereotype. So how does it do it? How does it defy logic and return to the thrower? The secret lies in a beautiful and admittedly brain-breaking piece of physics. It's the result of the two principles we've already mastered: aerodynamic lift and gyroscopic stability, colliding with each other in a very specific way. It's what happens when an unstoppable force meets a very stubborn object. Let's build this from the ground up. First, remember how the boomerang is thrown: vertically, with a powerful spin. Let's freeze frame it in mid-air. It's spinning like a propeller, moving forward. Now focus on the two wings. The wing that is currently at the top of the spin is moving forward through the air, but it also has the speed of the rotation added to it, so its total speed through the air is forward speed plus rotational speed. Now look at the wing at the bottom of the spin. It's also moving forward, but its rotation is carrying it backwards relative to the direction of flight. So its total speed is forward speed, rotational speed. The conclusion is simple but revolutionary. The top wing is always moving through the air much faster than the bottom wing. Second, remember what we learned about airfoils. The faster a wing moves through the air, the more lift it generates. So if the top wing is always moving faster than the bottom wing, it means the top wing is always creating significantly more lift than the bottom wing. This is the key. The boomerang is not in equilibrium. There is an unbalanced force acting on it. There is a constant, powerful push of extra lift on whichever wing is currently at the top of the rotation. Logically, you would expect this unbalanced force to simply flip the boomerang over, to make it do a somersault. But it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is the magic of gyroscopic physics. This is the final boss of party trick physics: gyroscopic precession. It's a fundamental rule of our universe that when you have a spinning object, a gyroscope, and you try to apply a force to tilt it, the gyroscope doesn't tilt in the direction you push it. Instead, the force is expressed 90 degrees later in the direction of rotation. It's a deeply weird, counterintuitive rule, as if the universe designed it specifically to mess with our heads. The classic example is a spinning bicycle wheel. If you hold it by its axle and try to tilt the top of the wheel to the right, it won't tilt right. It will swerve away from you. The push to the side becomes a push forwards or backwards. Now apply this bizarre rule to our boomerang. There is a constant upward push of extra lift on the top wing. This force is trying to tilt the spinning disc. But because it's a gyroscope, it can't just tilt. The force of that upward push gets translated 90 degrees forward in the direction of the spin. And what is 90 degrees forward from the top of the spinning boomerang? It's the leading edge of its flight path. So, a force that is pushing up results in a force that pushes the boomerang sideways. This constant sideways push is what makes the boomerang turn. It's not flying straight anymore. It is in a state of continuous, gentle, controlled turning. And if an object in the air is in a continuous turn, what is its flight path? A circle. It comes back. That's it. That's the entire secret. It's not magic. It is a masterpiece of engineering, designed to create a precise aerodynamic imbalance that, when combined with the bizarre laws of gyroscopic motion, forces the projectile into a circular path. The mainstream physics of precession that explain this have been understood since the 19th century, but they were mastered intuitively by Aboriginal craftsmen thousands of years earlier. And as a quirky tidbit, not all returning boomerangs fly in a perfect circle. Depending on the subtle variations in the airfoil, the angle of the wings, and the throw, they can be made to fly in ellipses, S-curves, or even figure eights, a bit like the path you take through the supermarket when you've forgotten your shopping list. Physicists to this day still model and debate the exact flight dynamics, with the effects of the boomerang's lie-over angle during flight adding another layer of complexity. The boomerang doesn't want to come back. It has no choice. It is forced to by the beautiful invisible laws of physics it was so perfectly designed to exploit. You have the secret. You understand the beautiful counterintuitive dance of physics that forces a boomerang to return. It seems like a perfect closed system, a well-made tool, a well-practiced throw, and a predictable law of nature. You can almost feel the satisfaction of having solved the puzzle. And then you feel a cool breeze snake across your skin, and the dry leaves on the ground rustle. A new character has just walked onto the stage, and it's the one that can ruin the entire performance. The wind. All that elegant physics, all that perfect gyroscopic precession is happening within a medium that is almost never still. The air itself is a turbulent, invisible ocean of currents, eddies, and waves. And for the boomerang thrower, this is not a minor inconvenience, it is the entire game. Our relationship with the wind is, for the most part, one of mild annoyance. We get frustrated when it messes up our hair, steals a hat, or makes it difficult to ride a bike. Our most advanced technique for understanding it is to pull out a smartphone and check a weather app that predicts a gentle 5 mph breeze, while a rogue gust is currently trying to steal our garden furniture. For the Aboriginal hunter, the wind was not a nuisance. It was a language. It was a living force to be read, respected, and partnered with. To throw a boomerang, especially a returning one, without first having a deep conversation with the air would be an act of pure folly. This is a skill that borders on the supernatural, but it's grounded in a lifetime of keen observation. The hunter stands, feeling the direction of the breeze on his face, of course, but he is sensing so much more. He is feeling its consistency. Is it a steady, laminar flow, or is it gusty and unpredictable? He looks at the way the spinifex grass shivers, the way the leaves on a distant ghost gum tremble. He might see a small dust devil twisting in the distance, a sign of thermal updrafts from the sun-baked ground. He is, in effect, a master meteorologist of what scientists call the planetary boundary layer, the chaotic, friction-filled lowest level of the atmosphere. He understands its patterns intuitively, without ever needing to know the formal name. This knowledge dictates the entire throw. As a quirky and brilliant tidbit of technique, a thrower might toss a pinch of dust or a single dry leaf into the air before throwing. He's not just checking the direction. He's watching the way the dust cloud moves or the leaf tumbles. Does it drift smoothly? Does it swirl and dip? This simple act is a sophisticated diagnostic tool, revealing the hidden turbulence in the air. Having read the conditions, he adjusts his throw. A returning boomerang is typically thrown about 45 degrees to the right of the oncoming wind for a right-handed thrower. He uses the force of the wind as an energy source, letting it help push the boomerang around its circular path. If the wind is strong, he might throw with more power and a lower trajectory, so the boomerang doesn't get lifted up and carried away. If the air is still, he might throw higher, giving it more time to complete its journey. It's like trying to solve a multivariable calculus problem, but you have to do it in a split second by feel, while riding a unicycle. Ethno-ecologists still debate how this complex knowledge of microclimates was transmitted from one generation to the next. Was it through direct instruction, with an elder pointing out the signs and reciting rules and aphorisms? Or was it a more non-verbal, deep listening to the land, an embodied knowledge that is absorbed over a lifetime of constant, minute observation until it becomes as natural as breathing? The answer is likely both. It was a science and an art, a system of knowledge that was both taught and felt. For the Kylie, this skill was about precision. Over a 100-meter throw, even a slight crosswind can push the projectile several feet off course. The hunter had to instinctively calculate this drift, aiming not at the target, but at where the target would be relative to the wind's push. For the returning boomerang, the calculation was an order of magnitude more complex. The wind affects every single point of its 360-degree journey differently. A skilled thrower can use the wind to make the boomerang hover in place, to speed up or slow down, to rise or fall, and to land with pinpoint accuracy at his feet. The wind isn't an obstacle to be overcome, it's a medium to be sculpted. The thrower, the boomerang, and the wind are not three separate things, but a single dynamic system. It is the final, breathtaking layer of genius in this story. You're no longer alone. The solitary contemplation of the boomerang is over, because this next part of its story is not about a single person. It's about a team. It's about a plan. You've learned the physics, you've perfected the throw in your mind, and you've felt the whispers of the wind. Now you will see all of those elements come together in a breathtaking display of cooperative hunting. The most widely accepted answer to the question, what was the returning boomerang actually for? The sky is just beginning to soften from black to a deep, bruised purple. A cool mist hangs over the still water of a billabong, a placid oxbow lake fringed with paperbark trees and reeds. The pre-dawn air is chilly and filled with the gentle waking sounds of the bush. You are hidden, crouched low in the reeds, and your heart is beating in a slow, steady rhythm of anticipation. A few yards away, another hunter is equally still, and another beyond him. You are all part of a silent, patient line. Stretched between you, held just above the ground, is a vast, fine net, woven from the tough fibers of the kurrajong tree. A mainstream archaeological fact is that these nets were a huge part of the Aboriginal toolkit, masterpieces of craft that could be hundreds of meters long, and represented a massive community investment of time and labor. They were used for catching everything from kangaroos to fish. Today, the target is the flock of hundreds of ducks and magpie geese, currently resting on the water's surface, their silhouettes dark shapes on the pearlescent water. A direct assault would be useless. A single spear or a thrown kylie might get you one bird, but the rest of the flock would explode into the air and scatter in every direction, a wasted opportunity. This hunt requires something more subtle. It requires a shepherd, or more accurately, a sheepdog for birds. A short distance away, a single figure detaches from the shadows and walks to the edge of the water. He holds a boomerang, the lighter, more curved, returning kind. He stands for a moment motionless, feeling the faint morning breeze, gauging its direction and strength. Then, with a fluid motion you've already pictured, he swings his arm and snaps his wrist. The boomerang leaps from his hand with that familiar menacing whirr. But he doesn't throw it at the birds. He throws it high over them. It climbs into the paling sky, a dark, spinning crescent against the dawn. The flock, startled by the sudden movement, becomes restless. A few heads pop up, and then the boomerang reaches the apex of its arc. It hangs there for a second, and its gyroscopic precession takes hold, forcing it into its long, curving return path. It is now a silent, menacing object, circling high above them, its whirring sound carrying down to the water. And this is where the genius of the technique is revealed. As a quirky but vital tidbit, that high-pitched whirring sound the boomerang makes is acoustically very similar to the noise made by the wings of a swooping bird of prey, like a peregrine falcon or a whistling kite. It is a sound that is hardwired into the DNA of every duck and goose as a signal for absolute terror. The flock erupts. It is a chaos of panicked quacking, beating wings, and splashing water. But it's not a random scattering. Their instinct tells them to flee from the predator circling above. They fly low, fast, and tight together, a brown river of birds pouring away from the perceived danger overhead. And the hunter, with his perfect throw, has ensured that the only clear escape path is directly towards the line of hidden hunters. Wildlife biologists and ethno-ornithologists still debate how much oral versus visual stimulus from the boomerang contributed to the bird's panic. Was it primarily the hawk-like sound that triggered the flocking response? Or was the terrifying sight of a silent circling object above them the more significant factor? For the birds who probably think the apocalypse has arrived, it's a purely academic question. You and the other hunters tense as the wall of birds comes rushing towards you. At the last second, the signal is given, and the net is raised. The front line of the flock hits the fine mesh and tumbles down in a heap of flapping wings. The hunt has been a staggering success, and as you look back towards the thrower, you see him calmly pluck the returning boomerang out of the air as it completes its journey. It was a perfect piece of teamwork, far more effective than any modern corporate team-building exercise, and with a much tastier outcome. This, then, is the purpose of the magician. It is not a toy. It is a psychological weapon. It is a tool of strategy, an instrument used to manipulate the behavior of other species through a deep, intimate knowledge of their instincts. It kills not by impact but by suggestion. The hunt is over. The nets are full. The community will eat well tonight. The returning boomerang, its spectacular work done, rests in the hunter's hand. Its practical purpose has been brilliantly demonstrated. But if you look closer, you'll see that its story isn't finished. There is another layer of information, another language encoded onto its very surface. I want you to go back to holding that kylie, or perhaps a returning boomerang in your mind. This time I want you to focus not on its weight or its curve, but on its skin. Run your thumb over it. You might feel a series of fine parallel grooves, a patch of cross-hatched lines, a winding, snaking pattern. These are not scratches from use. They are deliberate marks etched into the wood with a sharp flint or a shell's edge. This is not decoration, this is text. In a culture without a written alphabet, the surfaces of tools, weapons, and bodies become the pages of a library. The boomerang is a canvas. The mainstream historical fact is that Aboriginal art is a complex system of symbols, with regional styles as distinct as Italian Renaissance painting is from Japanese ukiyo-e. In places like Arnhem Land, artists use fine lines of red and yellow ochre to create intricate cross-hatching, a style known as rark. These patterns are not just pretty designs. They can represent the shimmering scales of a fish, the energy of a sacred site, or the ancestral power of a specific clan. On a boomerang, these marks are a statement. They can declare the owner's identity, his clan, his country, and his connection to the dreaming. It's an ID card and a passport carved in wood. We think we're being creative when we put a sticker on our laptop. This is a level of personalization that is orders of magnitude more profound. Imagine the craftsman from Section 4. After he has shaped the wood with stone and hardened it with fire, after he has tested its balance and feel, he might sit for hours patiently incising these lines. He uses the sharp tooth of a kangaroo or a carefully knapped piece of quartz, scraping away the wood in a pattern that has been taught to him, a pattern that has been passed down for 1,000 years. He might then rub colored ochre into the grooves, white pipe clay, red and yellow iron oxides, black charcoal, making the pattern stand out. Each line has a meaning, each shape a story. The boomerang is no longer just a tool. It is now an artifact, imbued with a spiritual dimension, a vessel for a story. As a particularly mind-blowing, quirky tidbit, some boomerangs, especially from the central desert, are covered in a dense, flowing network of incised lines and circles. At first glance, it looks like a beautiful abstract pattern, but anthropologists have come to understand that these are often maps. They are songlines etched in wood. The circles might represent significant sites: a waterhole, a camp, a place where a creation ancestor rested. The winding lines that connect them represent the paths of those ancestors, the routes a traveler would take, the song he would sing to navigate. The boomerang is a portable map of both the physical and the spiritual landscape. The closest we have to that is a GPS that screams recalculating every time we take a wrong turn. The depth of this visual language is staggering. Art historians and anthropologists still debate the accessibility of these symbols. Were the meanings of the patterns on a boomerang open knowledge within a community, readable by anyone? Or did the deeper interpretations belong to a secret, sacred realm, with the full meaning accessible only to initiated elders who held the highest levels of cultural knowledge? It's likely both were true. A child might recognize a pattern as representing a kangaroo track, but an elder would see in that same pattern a whole chapter of the kangaroo ancestors' creation journey. The information density of these designs, using just a few simple geometric motifs, could probably rival a modern PowerPoint infographic. The art and the function were never separate. A boomerang incised with the story of a powerful sky hero might be considered more effective in an open plains hunt. A boomerang bearing the marks of a water python ancestor might be chosen for a hunt near a billabong, its spiritual connection to the place enhancing its physical performance. The story gives the tool power. The lines you feel under your thumb are not an afterthought. They are as crucial to the boomerang's identity as the airfoil that gives it lift and the spin that gives it stability. You are holding a weapon, a tool, a musical instrument, and now you realize you are also holding a book, a map, and a sacred text. You are holding a book, a map, a sacred text, all disguised as a hunting tool. You've explored the materials science of its construction, the complex aerodynamics of its flight, the biomechanics of its throw, the meteorology of its environment, and the intricate symbolism of its surface. And this brings you to the final and perhaps most profound question of all: how? How was this colossal body of scientific and cultural knowledge, what you might call the Boomerang's operating system, preserved and transmitted with such flawless accuracy for 20,000 years without a single word of it ever being written down? In our modern world, we are conditioned to believe that writing is the only truly reliable way to store information. We trust a printed book, a signed contract, a saved document. Our own memories, by contrast, are notoriously faulty. We can't remember a password we set last week. Our most common form of oral tradition is collectively misremembering the lyrics to a popular song or arguing about a quote from a movie. The idea of entrusting a complex aerodynamic blueprint to human memory for 200 centuries seems, to us, like an impossibility. A recipe for failure. This is because we fundamentally misunderstand the nature and power of a true oral tradition. It is not a casual game of telephone. It is a highly structured, rigorous, and sophisticated system for data storage and retrieval. The first and most obvious method of transmission is direct, hands-on apprenticeship. Imagine a young boy sitting for years at the side of his grandfather or uncle, the master craftsman. He doesn't read a manual. He watches. He watches the way the elder's eyes scan the trees, looking for that perfect curve of a mulga root. He feels the heft of the stone adze. His hands learn by feel the exact pressure to apply, the precise angle to scrape to create that subtle airfoil. This is the original hands-on internship, and the stakes are a little higher than learning how to use the photocopier. Day after day, year after year, the knowledge is transferred from one nervous system to another, through muscle memory and direct observation. But physical skills are only part of the story. What about the principles, the why behind the how? This knowledge was encoded into stories, songs, and ceremonies. An elder would never sit a group of boys down for a lecture on gyroscopic precession. Instead, he might tell a story from the dreamtime about a creator spirit, a whirlwind hero, whose dance stabilized the land, and in the telling, the importance of spin and balance would be deeply embedded. The rules for reading the wind might be encoded in a song about the journey of a migratory bird. This brings us to a crucial mainstream fact. Aboriginal oral traditions have been proven by modern science to be astonishingly accurate repositories of ancient information. Stories told by the Gunditj Mara people in Victoria describe volcanic eruptions that geologists have now dated to over 30,000 years ago. Coastal groups around the continent have stories that accurately describe the flooding of their ancestral lands by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age, some 10,000 years ago. These are not vague myths. They are eyewitness accounts, passed down as a sacred trust. To maintain this incredible fidelity, the traditions used powerful mnemonic devices, a quirky and brilliant form of multi-sensory error checking. A long story or songline might be linked to a physical journey across the land, with each verse corresponding to a specific rock formation, creek bed, or tree. To recite the story, you had to walk the path physically or in your mind. Other information was encoded in the ritual movements of a dance or in the incised patterns on a message stick. Linguists and cognitive scientists still debate the mechanisms that make oral tradition so resilient. Is it the poetic and musical structure of song that makes information more memorable? Or is it the high-stakes social context, where misremembering a sacred detail could have dire spiritual or practical consequences? The boomerang you hold is the physical product of this oral library. The knowledge of the wood, the airfoil, the spin, the throw, the wind, the net hunt, the dreamtime python etched on its surface, every single thing we have talked about, was a chapter, a verse, a line of code in this immense unwritten encyclopedia. Its very existence is a testament to the power of the human mind to remember, to understand, and to pass on what is important not on paper, but in breath, song, and story. You are holding the culmination of thousands of years of careful listening and remembering, a physical library of ancient knowledge. It feels timeless, a relic from a world that is now almost entirely gone. And yet, the boomerang story is not over. Its flight is so compelling, its physics so elegant, that it has refused to remain a museum piece. Its journey continues. And our next stop is not an ancient campsite or a colonial museum, but a bright, modern, and perhaps slightly surreal place, the competitive sports field. Let the image of the dusky outback fade. Instead, you're standing on a large manicured lawn, marked with concentric circles like an archery target. The air is filled with the shouts of encouragement and the sharp whiz of things moving very fast. People in brightly colored team jerseys are stretching, consulting clipboards, and staring intently at the sky. On the ground next to them is an arsenal of objects that you recognize as boomerangs. but many are twisted into forms that would be utterly alien to the Aboriginal craftsman. Welcome to the world of modern boomerang sports, the unlikely and fascinating next chapter in the tool's life. This is the highly evolved descendant of those gentlemen's throwing clubs we touched on earlier. It's an organized international sport with its own rules, governing bodies, and a World Cup. A mainstream fact for you: the International Federation of Boomerang Associations, IFBA, holds a championship every 2 years where teams from Japan, Germany, the United States, Brazil, Australia, and more compete. The ancient tool has found a new life in the arena. But here, the goals are very different. The objective is not to secure a meal or tell a sacred story, but to score points. And to do that, the boomerang itself has evolved. You watch one of the competitions called fast catch. A thrower stands in the center circle, hurls a small, wickedly fast boomerang, catches it, and throws it again, 5 times. The goal is to complete the 5 throws and catches as quickly as possible. The world record is under 15 seconds. Then there's endurance, which sounds like the world's most demanding new cardio workout. The goal is to complete as many throws and catches as possible in 5 minutes. The best athletes can manage over 80 catches. To achieve these incredible feats, the tool has been radically redesigned. This is where you see the truly quirky tidbit of the modern sport. The traditional V-shape is often replaced by designs optimized for pure performance. For fast catch, the throwers use small, 3-bladed boomerangs that look like futuristic throwing stars. They are made of lightweight composite materials like carbon fiber or phenolic resin. They complete their short, circular flight path in just a couple of seconds, spinning with an audible scream. For another event, maximum time aloft or MTA, the designs are even more bizarre. These boomerangs can be huge, with a wingspan of over 2 feet, but they are incredibly light, often shaped like a giant asymmetrical C or a delicate pinwheel. They are designed to be thrown high into the sky, to catch a rising thermal current, and to hover, spinning slowly like a sycamore seed for as long as possible. The world record is over 14 minutes. It's also a great way to lose your boomerang if you're not careful, watching it just slowly drift up and away on an invisible elevator of hot air. The difference between one of these high-tech competition boomerangs and the Mulga Wood Kylie is like the difference between your family car and a Formula One race car. They both operate on the same basic principles, but one has been stripped down and optimized for a single extreme purpose. And this, of course, raises a familiar, complicated question. Sports sociologists and cultural critics still debate whether the formalization of boomerang throwing into a Western-style competitive sport is a positive evolution that keeps the tradition alive and celebrates its physics, or if it represents a final, complete decontextualization of the object, stripping it of its last vestiges of cultural meaning in favor of measurable performance. There is no easy answer. But as you stand on this field watching a German thrower use a carbon fiber tri-blader to complete a perfect fast catch round, you have to marvel at the sheer adaptability of the core idea. The fundamental principles of the airfoil, gyroscopic precession and reading the wind, the very same knowledge that allowed an Aboriginal hunter to feed his family, are now being used to win a gold medal. The ancient technology is so robust, so ingenious, that it continues to inspire new forms of human expression, competition, and play, thousands of years after it was first conceived. From the sports field, where performance is measured in seconds and meters, we make one final journey into the modern world. This time, our destination is a place of quiet, climate-controlled precision. You are no longer in the open air. You are in a laboratory. The air hums with the sound of cooling fans and machinery. A scientist in a white lab coat is mounting a boomerang, a perfect replica of a traditional hunting kylie, onto a metal stand inside a glass chamber. This is a wind tunnel. The boomerang, an object born of the vast, unpredictable outback, is about to have its deepest secrets analyzed by the rigorous, methodical tools of modern science. For centuries, the boomerang was a curiosity to Western science. Now, it is a subject of serious aerodynamic research, and the more scientists study it, the more they are forced to admire the genius of its ancient creators. The scene is almost comical in its contrast. The Aboriginal craftsman stood in his laboratory, the open bush, and used his senses, his experience, and a body of oral tradition to test his designs. The modern aerospace engineer stands in her laboratory, this sterile, controlled room, and uses laser velocimeters, pressure sensors, and supercomputers to do the same thing. And after spending millions of dollars on equipment, she often arrives at the exact same conclusion as the hunter from 20,000 years ago. Yep, that shape works best. A mainstream fact of modern research is that aerospace engineers, including some at NASA, have put Boomerang airfoils to the test. They place them in wind tunnels and blow streams of smoke over their surfaces, watching the way the air flows over that hand-carved curve. They measure the forces of lift and drag with incredible precision, and what they find is that the traditional airfoil shapes are exceptionally efficient. They generate a high amount of lift for a very low amount of drag, allowing the Boomerang to fly for long distances with remarkable energy conservation. The intuitive design turns out to be a near-perfect solution to a complex aerodynamic equation. Then they take it to the next level: computer simulation. Using a powerful software suite for computational fluid dynamics, or CFD, scientists can create a perfect digital model of the Boomerang and simulate its flight through a virtual atmosphere. On the screen, you see the Boomerang colored in a psychedelic rainbow of blues and reds. A pressure map showing the high pressure zone underneath the wings and the low pressure zone on top. The computer crunches trillions of calculations per second, modeling the behavior of every molecule of air flowing over the surface. It's here that science sometimes gets a lesson in humility. As a quirky and telling tidbit, one of the hardest parts of the flight to accurately model is the transition phase, a complex wobble that happens just after the throw as the Boomerang shifts from a vertical to a more horizontal flight plane. It's a crucial self-correcting moment for a stable return, and it's so dynamically complex that it can still give a supercomputer a massive headache, sometimes crashing the simulation altogether, as if the ancient spirits of the Boomerang are having a little fun with the code. High-speed cameras add another layer of insight. Filming a throw at thousands of frames per second and playing it back in slow motion reveals the magic in stunning detail. You can see the explosive snap of the wrist, the way the Boomerang's wings flex slightly under the strain, the vortexes of air peeling off the wingtips. It's like watching a sports replay of your own clumsiness, revealing exactly how you managed to trip over your own feet. But in this case, it reveals the subtle, almost invisible perfection of the technique. All of this rigorous analysis has fueled a new appreciation, but also a new line of scholarly inquiry. Engineers and historians of technology still debate whether the ancient designs represent a perfectly optimized solution given the material constraints of wood, or if they are simply a good enough solution that became locked in by tradition. In other words, using their deep knowledge, could an Aboriginal craftsman have made an even better Boomerang? Or had they already pushed the technology of carved wood to its absolute physical limits? Ultimately, this journey into the lab is a journey of validation. Modern science is not debunking the old ways. It is simply, and with great effort, catching up. It is translating an ancient embodied wisdom into its own language of equations, graphs, and data sets. The scientist in the lab coat and the craftsman by his small fire are separated by millennia, but they are united by a shared sense of wonder at this object, this elegant, improbable flying wing that bridges the gap between ancient intuition and modern understanding. The wind tunnel falls silent. The supercomputer finishes its simulation. Modern science, with all its power, has confirmed what the Aboriginal craftsman knew all along. The Boomerang is a work of aerodynamic genius. But this confirmation, this validation, only deepens the ultimate question, pushing it into the realm of philosophy. We know how it works, we know what it was used for, but we will never truly know how it was first conceived. Specifically, the returning Boomerang. The straight-flying Kylie is a logical refinement of a throwing stick, but the one that comes back is a leap into counterintuitive physics. So you sit there in the imaginary darkness, holding this impossible object, and you ponder the greatest debate in the Boomerang's entire 30,000-year story. Was it a fluke, or was it a calculated masterstroke? This is the central question that archaeologists and historians of technology still debate. Was the origin of the returning Boomerang a stroke of accidental genius, or a triumph of deliberate, systematic engineering? Let's explore the happy accident theory first. The scene is easy to imagine. A craftsman is shaping a standard heavy kylie. Perhaps the piece of wood he is using has an unforeseen twist in its grain. Perhaps, as he heats it over the fire to set its curve, he holds it there a fraction too long, causing one wing to warp slightly. He doesn't notice the subtle flaw. He finishes the tool, and as is his custom, he takes it out for a test throw. He snaps his wrist, sends it flying, and it doesn't fly straight. It begins to curve. You can almost feel his shock. He throws it again. It curves again. The first person to ever witness a boomerang return probably ducked, thinking he had angered a spirit or that his weapon was possessed, right before the dawn of a world-changing realization. He would have studied the flawed boomerang, discovered the twist, and then, driven by curiosity, tried to replicate it. Our greatest accidental discoveries usually involve finding a $10 bill in an old coat. This would have been on a slightly grander scale. This theory is plausible. It fits a well-known pattern in the history of invention where mistakes and chance observations lead to breakthroughs. But there is another school of thought, the deliberate engineering theory. This theory argues that it is almost condescending to assume that the invention must have been an accident. It posits that the aerodynamic principles of the kylie were so profoundly understood that a gifted individual, a sort of Elon Musk of the Pleistocene, could have reasoned his way to the solution. He might have asked a simple question. I can make a stick fly straight. What would I have to change to make it curve? He might have then begun a long process of trial and error, deliberately altering the airfoil, introducing a twist, changing the angle of the wings until he achieved the desired effect. This theory is bolstered by a quirky and beautiful piece of potential evidence: biomimicry. Anyone who has spent time in the Australian bush has seen the spinning seed pods of trees like the hakea or certain eucalypts. When they fall, they auto-rotate, spinning like tiny single-bladed helicopters to slow their descent. An ancient observer with a deep understanding of aerodynamics would have watched this. They would have seen that nature itself had already solved the problem of combining lift and spin. It is entirely plausible that the boomerang's design was inspired by these natural autogyros, a deliberate attempt to replicate a natural phenomenon. The historical reality is that both accident and deliberate invention are powerful engines of progress. As a mainstream fact of technological history, penicillin was an accident, while the theory of relativity was a product of pure, deliberate thought. So where does the boomerang fit? We will never have a definitive answer. There are no journal entries from the inventor. There is no patent filing. There is only the object itself, a silent witness. Perhaps the most likely answer is a beautiful synthesis of the two. Picture this. A craftsman makes a kylie with an accidental warp. He throws it, and it curves. Many others before him might have done the same and simply thrown the defective tool away. But this craftsman has a prepared mind. He has spent his life observing the flight of birds and the spin of seed pods. He doesn't see a mistake. He sees a possibility. He recognizes the significance of the accident because he already possesses the theoretical framework to understand it. The accident is the spark, but his deep knowledge is the tinder. He then begins the deliberate process of refining the fluke, mastering it and turning it into a reliable tool. Whether born of a mistake, a moment of genius, or both, the result is the same. An object that flies in the face of expectation, a testament to the restless, curious, and inventive spirit that defines our species. The mystery of the boomerang's origin adds another layer to its powerful story. But to fully appreciate the culture of ingenuity that produced it, you have to understand that the boomerang was not a singular, isolated miracle of invention. It was one brilliant component in a wider system of sophisticated projectile technology. The same minds that mastered aerodynamics also mastered ballistics. I want you to mentally put down the boomerang for a moment. In your other hand, you pick up a different tool. It's a flat, slightly curved piece of wood, maybe 2 feet long. It has a grip at one end, and at the other, a small, sharp peg of wood or bone, secured with sinew and resin. This unassuming object is a woomera, and it is arguably one of the most important and powerful inventions in human history. The woomera is a spear thrower. On its own, it is nothing. A spear, thrown by even the strongest arm, has a limited range and power. But when you combine the two, a kind of magic happens. The woomera acts as a simple lever, a third joint in the human arm. The hollowed-out end of the spear fits neatly onto the small peg of the woomera. The thrower holds the woomera's grip and the spear together, brings his arm back, and then hurls his entire arm forward in a powerful fluid motion. At the end of the arc, the woomera whips forward, and the peg transfers all of that accumulated energy into the back of the spear, launching it with incredible force. It's the same principle as a sling or a catapult, and it effectively turns a human arm into a high-powered cannon. The result is staggering. A spear launched with a woomera can travel at speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour, more than double the speed of a hand-thrown spear. Its effective range is easily over 100 meters, and it strikes with enough focused kinetic energy to pierce the thick hide of a large kangaroo or emu. This was the primary weapon for big game. While the Kylie was the versatile tool for medium-range encounters, the woomera was the high-caliber sniper rifle of the Aboriginal toolkit. It is, without a doubt, the original performance-enhancing device. Now, as a mainstream historical fact, the spear thrower as a concept is not exclusively Australian. It was a global Stone Age technology, famously known as the atlatl by the Aztecs in the Americas, and used by Paleolithic hunters in Europe. But while the basic principle is universal, the Australian woomera was developed with a unique flair for multifunctionality. Just like the boomerang, the woomera was rarely just one thing. This is where you find a truly brilliant and quirky tidbit of design. The handle of the woomera was often coated in a lump of strong resin, and into this resin was fixed a razor-sharp flake of stone. This transformed the handle into a woodworking tool, an adze or a scraper, perfect for shaping a new spear or carving a wooden bowl. The main body of the woomera, being broad and sometimes slightly dished, was used as a tray for mixing ochre pigments, or for carrying a glowing coal from an old campfire to a new one. The woomera in your hand can launch a spear, carve a spear, and carry the fire to cook the meal that the spear provides. Your smartphone can order a pizza, but it feels a bit less impressive now, doesn't it? Ballistics experts and archaeologists still debate the precise efficiency gain of the woomera. While it's clear it dramatically increases spear velocity, is the primary advantage the extended range, allowing a hunter to strike from further away? Is it the increased impact energy, ensuring a clean and ethical kill on a large animal? Or is it the flatter trajectory of the spear, which makes aiming over a long distance far more accurate and intuitive? The answer, as is so often the case, is probably all of the above. It represents a total upgrade to every aspect of spear hunting performance, so you now have the two pillars of this ancient arsenal in your mind. The boomerang, a masterclass in aerodynamics, a spinning wing that flies on a cushion of air. And the woomera, a masterclass in mechanics and ballistics, a simple lever that turns human muscle into devastating projectile force. The existence of both, side by side, proves that the genius we have been exploring was not a one-off. It was a systematic, deep-seated cultural understanding of physics and ability to see the world, not just as it is, but as a collection of forces and principles that could be understood, harnessed, and transformed into tools for survival. You are standing in the deep, profound quiet of the Australian night, the echoes of the past swirling around you. In your mind, you hold the knowledge of the Kylie, the returning boomerang, and the woomera. You have explored a toolkit of such elegant and brutal efficiency that it feels complete. A perfect system for survival on this harsh and beautiful continent. But there is one final piece of the puzzle, one last layer of knowledge to understand. I want you to lift your gaze from the tools in your hands and look up. Look up past the dark silhouettes of the ghost gums into the infinite diamond-dusted blackness of the sky. You are looking at the other half of the map. In the modern world, for most of us, the night sky is a distant, decorative backdrop. We might be able to point out the Big Dipper or Orion, but our primary use for the stars is to check a horoscope app to see if it's a good day to ask for a raise. But for the people who perfected the boomerang, this sky was not a decoration. It was a clock, a compass, a calendar, a law book, and a Bible all rolled into one. Aboriginal astronomy is the oldest astronomical tradition in the world, a science of breathtaking complexity and practicality. While Western astronomy connects the bright dots of stars to form its constellations, a hunter, a lion, a saucepan, Many Aboriginal cultures did something even more remarkable. They found shapes in the darkness, creating dark constellations out of the black dust lanes that wind through the bright river of the Milky Way. Look towards the brightest part of the Milky Way, near the familiar shape of the Southern Cross. Stare into the dark patches within the River of Light. A mainstream and beautiful fact of ethnoastronomy is that here, you can see one of the greatest celestial figures, the emu in the sky. The very dark Coalsack Nebula, right next to the Southern Cross, forms its head. Its long, graceful neck, body, and legs are traced by the dark void stretching along the galaxy's length. It is a perfect silhouette of an emu, running across the heavens. And it is not just a picture, it is a calendar. In autumn, when the celestial emu is rising horizontally on the horizon, it signals to the people on the ground that real emus are now laying their eggs. The sky tells you when to hunt, when to gather, when to perform ceremonies. The universe is not a distant, cold place. It is an active participant in the seasons of life on Earth. It's certainly a more impressive constellation than, say, Triangulum, which is, yes, just a triangle. So where is the Boomerang in this celestial map? Its shape is everywhere. The elegant arc of the Milky Way itself can be seen as the throw of a creator spirit. The crescent moon is a blade slicing through the night. Meteors shooting across the sky are seen in some traditions as the fiery flight of a magical Kylie thrown by a sky hero. The stories of the stars are filled with great hunts and epic journeys, and the hunters in those stories carry the same tools as the hunters on the ground. The stars in the cluster we call the Pleiades are, in many Aboriginal traditions, the Seven Sisters, forever fleeing from a hunter in the constellation of Orion. The story of their chase across the sky is a celestial songline, and you can be sure that Hunter is armed. As a quirky tidbit, even the constellations we think we know are seen through a different cultural lens. The Southern Cross, which is so central to the national identity of modern Australia, is interpreted in a multitude of ways. For the Arrernte people of the Central Desert, its four main stars are the footprint of Wallawara, a great eagle ancestor. For the Boomerang people of Victoria, it's a possum named Bunya, hiding in a tree from a hunter. The sky is not a fixed universal text, but a canvas for the unique stories of each culture. The sophistication of this tradition may have even been encoded in stone. Ethnoastronomers and cultural historians still debate the precise astronomical alignments of certain ancient stone arrangements like Wurdi in Victoria. This egg-shaped ring of basalt stone seems to mark the position of the setting sun on the solstices and equinoxes with remarkable precision. Is this Australia's Stonehenge, a sophisticated seasonal calendar built thousands of years ago? The evidence is compelling. The patterns on the ground reflect the patterns in the sky, which in turn reflect the patterns of life. The boomerang you hold, etched with its own songlines, is a microcosm of this worldview. It is a piece of the land that reflects the law of the sky. It is a tool that connects all three realms, the earth below, the human in the middle, and the cosmos above. The stars of the celestial emu wheel slowly across the sky, and you are back where you began. You are standing in the vast, quiet heart of the Australian continent, the air cool on your skin, the scent of dust and spinifex in your nostrils. The epic journey is over. You have traveled across continents and through 30,000 years of human history. You have visited a Polish cave, a pharaoh's tomb, a modern sports field, and a sterile science lab. And now you are here, again, alone in the darkness, with the weight of a single, simple object in your hand. You hold the boomerang, and you feel the echo of everything it has been. It has had more careers than most of us ever will. It has been a hunting weapon and a digging tool, a musical instrument and a ceremonial scepter, a map of the land and a sacred text, a colonial curiosity, a global stereotype, a piece of high-tech sporting equipment, and a subject for aerodynamic research. Through all of this, it has endured, and that, perhaps, is its final and most important identity. The boomerang is a symbol of resilience. It represents the staggering, defiant resilience of the world's oldest continuous living culture. This is a culture that has survived the cataclysmic changes of the last ice age, the arrival of new peoples, the complete transformation of its environment, and 2 centuries of profound disruption and dispossession. And yet, The knowledge survives. The stories are still told. The songs are still sung. And in some parts of the country, the boomerangs are still made in the old way. Our modern idea of resilience is often just about making it through a difficult Monday. This is resilience on a geological timescale. This survival is not a passive act of preservation, but an active living process. As a quirky and hopeful tidbit, there is a growing movement across Australia of Indigenous rangers using cultural burning, traditional, low-intensity fire practices, to restore health to the landscape. In this work, the ancient knowledge is being revitalized. A ranger might point to a stand of mulga trees and know that its fire-resistant wood is the best for making a kylie, connecting the health of the land directly to the life of the tool. The story is not just in the past, it is being written today. And this leads to a vital ongoing debate for the future. Public historians and Indigenous leaders still debate the most respectful way to engage with objects like the boomerang in the 21st century. Should they be primarily seen as museum artifacts to be preserved behind glass? As pieces of intellectual property to be legally protected? Or as living tools to be actively used, adapted, and reinterpreted by new generations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? The answer is complex, and it is not ours to decide. But this conversation is happening, part of a global movement toward cultural recognition, exemplified by mainstream international agreements like the 2007 UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which affirms the right of all Indigenous peoples to control and protect their cultural heritage. The boomerang in your hand is not a simple thing. It is a dense, layered, and powerful object. It is a rebuke to any notion of primitive peoples or simple technology. It is a testament to a scientific tradition that is empirical, holistic, and deeply woven into the fabric of culture and country. It is proof that there are other ways of knowing, other ways of holding knowledge, and other ways of being human. In the end, after our 25,000-word journey trying to understand it, you get the feeling that the boomerang doesn't really need our analysis. It knows its own story. It carries its own truth. And if you listen closely, in the deep quiet of the Australian night, you can almost hear it, an echo whirring through time. And so, our long journey together comes to a gentle close. The analytical part of your mind can rest now, as the story settles into the quiet corners of your memory. The sharp details of physics and history begin to soften, blurring into a single resonant feeling of wonder. The vast starry sky above you seems to hum with a deep and ancient lullaby, a sound that has comforted this land for longer than we can possibly imagine. The air grows still, and the cool breath of the night invites a profound and welcome calm. Let the image of the red earth and the ghost gums fade slowly, leaving only the peaceful dark and the soft, rhythmic hum of the fan you might have turned on hours ago. The story is now a part of you, a small, smooth stone of knowledge to carry forward into your own dreams. There's nothing left to figure out, nothing more to learn tonight. All that is left is to rest, to let go, to drift. Hush now, it's time to sleep.